because Wizards Beyond Waverly plays ruined by this guy. This guy here is David Henrie, who plays Justin Russo, or if you want to go by full names, Justin Pepe Russo in Wizards of Waverly Place. And in recent time, he was the executive producer of the development of the continuation known as Beyond Waverly Place, which is where it's a story following Justin Russo, who has abandoned his wizarding past and became a middle school principal. But he is forced to go back into his wizarding path because Alex decides to drop off a new budding wizard known as Billy, who is, spoiler alert, her secret daughter. And I promise that reveal is not obvious whatsoever. Anyways, the show has finally reached its riveting conclusion with a mass amount of 4 total episodes. With those 4 episodes talking about the fate of Alex Russo after the conclusion of season 2, where she jumped into an evil portal, the reveal of her estranged husband that used to be evil but is actually not evil, and you get bits and pieces of information of other characters that we never saw up to this point. Some of those characters being Jennifer Stone, aka Harper Finkel, and my boy Mason. Now you might be curious about what I'm going to be talking about in this video because of the title. Well, in this video I wanted to talk about the overarching plot that happened in the final seasons of Beyond Waverly Place, but I also wanted to bring up some of the things that might have affected the conclusion of the series because it answers some questions that we had ever since the show's conception. So if you've been following the Wizards of Waverly Place universe ever since its original show back in the early 2000s, you and I both know that that show was one of the biggest shows that existed on Disney Channel at the time, along with other shows like Hannah Montana, That's So Raven, Sweet Life on Deck, and so on. But now we're in an age where everyone is getting a reboot, a continuation, a restart, whatever the case may be. And of course, Wizards is without exception. And ever since it was announced that Wizards Beyond Waverly Place, God, that is a mouthful, was announced, a lot of people were speculating on which characters are going to show up in the new reboot. Are we going to get OG characters? What's the plot lines? Who's it going to be focusing on? What story are we going to get with our old school wizarding friends that we used to grow up with? Well, if you watched my original video, which you should because I talk about the story a little bit more at length at that time, you will know that the origin story is a little bit lackluster. For a very slight and brief synopsis, it goes like this. Justin abandons being a wizard and keeps being a wizard away from his family. Billy gets dropped at his doorstep by Alex. He doesn't know why. He is forced to become a wizard again. Alex convinces him to become a wizarding teacher for Billy only because she might be the key to the world possibly being destroyed in the later future. Now you might be thinking that's not an entirely bad plotline, but unfortunately we do not get that much training in the majority of season 1 to season 2. The amount of training needed to give Billy the opportunity to save the world in any capacity was just not there. All we got is a bunch of random goofy shenanigans that didn't connect to the overarching plot at all. But one thing that was very constant is that you had the main plot that was following Billy and then the side plot that was following something that was happening with Justin, whether it made sense or not. Sometimes it didn't even matter in the grand scheme. Sometimes he had a storyline, I believe he had, connecting back to his old school monster hunting days, but it didn't even really yield any positive results. It was kind of a little bit of a nostalgia jab. But one thing that was abundantly clear throughout the show's runtime was the lack of OG character representation. Sure, we had a few cameos here and there of Jerry Russo the dad, sometimes with the mom, and some other characters that may have showed up once in a while, like we had one episode with Mr. Laritate, which don't get me wrong, I love that man, but he was never really that major of a character, so I was surprised they brought him back. But as you look into the background of what's happening through the development of the show, you might understand why there was a lot of major involvement with characters that were very important to Justin. In recent time across the internet, a lot of people have been calling Beyond Waverly Place the David Henrie Show, because it became abundantly clear that a lot of different episodes and a lot of arcs in the story revolved around Justin's development and a lot of characters that were important to Justin. Almost to a point that it was at a fault to the main character, who was supposed to have 10 times more personality than Justin, but for whatever reason she kind of felt a lot more flat compared to the original main character, which was Alex in Wizards of Waverly Place. But I low-key thought the character was low-key a psychopath because she almost killed one of the Russo brothers, literally in episode 1.
What do you think you're doing?
Going with you? You mess everything up. You clearly need help.
No, I don't. With magic cast by me alone, I send thee to the nowhere zone.
And of course, on top of that, the recent coming out of a lot of the OG characters and cast saying that they were not involved in the shows despite them wanting to be a part of the show. One main person that was actually very abundantly clear that he wanted to be a part of the show was the guy who played Max, aka Jake T. Austin. Apparently, he was in communication with David Henrie in around 2020 about his involvement of the OG show. It is also implied he actually did some scenes or some recordings. I don't know how true that is. I'm just going off as assumptions or based off what I've seen. But after a while, after not hearing anything back from David Henrie, he realized that an advertisement came up about the show, realized the show was different than how he was pitched to him before, and realized that they're probably moving forward without him, so he assumed that he was just not going to be involved. But then later on, he was also contacted by David Henrie again, while the show is airing, to possibly come back as Max on the show, which would I assume he's just trying to bring him back for like a really quick cheeky cameo. And he decided to reject that offer because he felt like his time was being wasted the first time, because he didn't contact him the second time. And on top of that, other actors were coming out and saying things that related to the development of the show. Jennifer Stone, Harper Finkel, a very beloved character of the original show, was in contact with David at one point in time, and actually she was told by him that he couldn't think of any point in time where she could fit into the story. And in my head I'm thinking, bro, that's Alex Russo's best friend. You mean to tell me that she's not attached to her hip in any capacity or anything after that? What are you talking about? And the only time she got introduced into the show or brought back on for any point in time was at the final season in those 4 episodes runs for one scene where she is not even physically there. She's just a figment of Alex's imagination. And it is implied that for whatever reason, Harper and Alex kind of drifted apart for reasons that we don't know. Hell, even in that scene alone, they confirmed that Mason is dead for whatever reason. Like, they made very questionable story arc decisions, and they just did these cameos that didn't feel like they were meaningful in any capacity outside of that. And that's not even including the original creator of Wizards of Waverly Place coming out on Twitter and saying he would have abolished the entire lore of Beyond Waverly Place by just simply making it a dream that happened in Max's head if it was up to him, which I find absolutely hilarious. But there's only one thing that a lot of people believe might be the most glaring evidence to think that this is why David Henrie put a lot of emphasis on his character in that entire show. Originally, before Wizards of Waverly Place was being developed, the show originally was called The Amazing O'Malleys, and David originally was supposed to be the lead of that show, with Alex being his twin sister, who was helping each other run a magic shop instead of a sub shop. Now, unfortunately, the show got canned and David got quote-unquote fired from that opportunity, but later on, Wizards of Waverly Place was being created and he was called back to be brought onto the show, but instead of being the lead, he was going to be the brother of Alex, and he was going to be called Wizards of Waverly Place, and she was going to be the main lead instead of him. So a lot of people have been pointing out and trying to understand, was it his fault? Was he just jealous? Was he trying to get back for the opportunity that he lost ages ago for Wizards of Waverly Place or for the Amazing O'Malleys? I honestly am not very sure, but according to the plot of the stories, it kind of matches up with that assumption. In Beyond Waverly Place, in my previous videos, I said one of the reasons why I don't think the show is going to meet a lot of expectations for original fans was because they don't feel like they can attach to Billy in any capacity. She just feels like a troublemaker for being a troublemaker's sake. It seemed like they were trying to replicate Alex, like it was someone's position or viewpoint of Alex from a very superficial viewpoint. When it comes to Alex in the Wizards of Waverly Place, she was doing it because she wanted freedom as a teenager. She wanted to have the opportunity to live her life as a wizard and to be free at the same time, but she was living under the restriction of the household because of her dad being a previous wizard and trying to train them and teach them responsibility, but she feels like she should have the option to be free and do whatever she wants without having to deal with the consequences of her actions because of it. That's why a lot of times in those episodes, it ended with her learning the solution of the spell because of her dad, or learning to figure it out on her own. Compared to Beyond Waverly Place, Billy kind of got saved every single opportunity for her to learn, or in fact she kind of just solved it on her own just by pure force of will, which kind of is meh. But for the grand scheme, her story never really changed. She always wanted to build upon this idea that she wanted to be accepted by the Russo family and to be perceived as someone who is not just unlovable. And until Justin actually accepts her as her teacher and actually starts teaching her for like 2 episodes, then that plotline is kind of resolved. She actually goes to that arc and realizes that the Russo family, or at least Justin's family, actually cares for her and calls her a, relatively honorary Russo. But outside of that, there were a lot of scenes that revolved around Justin following some of the antics he was doing that was either involving his sons or his wife Gianna or some of the magical shenanigans that he tried to help solve, but he wasn't even majorly involved in the conclusions either. He kind of only plays the guy that tries to know everything but then at the same time knows nothing, which is kind of weird. But it seems like when they were telling the story alongside Billy, they knew they couldn't make Justin like the default hero in the end or in the general consensus of the story. So they kind of try to make him be involved enough to where he is not forgotten, but at the same time, he doesn't do too much to where he actually makes a very valiant effort or impression in the story. It's so funny that Harper Finkel, that character who hasn't even been in the majority of the episodes, leaves a 10 times more impactful performance compared to anybody else that has shown up in the last few episodes, excluding Selena, because I'm not going to disrespect my girl. And don't get me wrong, I'm a little bit biased, I ain't gonna lie, because, I've been having a crush on Jennifer Stone ever since I saw Harper Finkel, in the very beginning, I like my redheads a little bit. But even taking that bias out of the equation, that story that she's been telling, even in that one episode, giving a lot of implications and ideas that we don't even get to follow just by talking to imaginary Alex or imaginary dream Alex. They even disrespected my boy Mason, who literally, as far as we are concerned, last time I checked, was alive and well in the conclusion of Wizards of Waverly Place. So when they revealed that he was dead, I try to understand, then why did you bring him back? And the whole point is that they're saying, oh, because she's in a dream and she's trying to get motivations to wake up, to remember what she needs to do to break free from the dimension that she was in, that she jumped into in season 2. But they didn't even use that opportunity to bring in the husband that she claims to be in love with deeply, that we have not seen in the entirety of the show's existence. We have literally seen nothing about the guy, and it's only in that final season that we see a face to the name, but for whatever reason, he doesn't show up in Dreamland. She remembers Mason, and she still feels the love for Mason, remembers those feelings, and somehow that was 10 times more impactful than Damian Penwolf, which almost clarifies and emphasizes the fact that there was a 10 times better story that could have surrounded Alex, Harper, Mason, or any other previous characters that could exist. Hell, I thought it would be a funny idea to think that Max actually was no longer a wizard, but make him some kind of magical creature. Make him have the ability to do wizard abilities, but because he's so rich because of the sandwich shop business that he created, he's so rich that he uses magic related powers. So he can still like teleport and do like quote unquote spells, but he does things related to money. So like if he teleports, he leaves pocket change behind. Like I thought that would be a really funny idea. So that way it still leaves the somewhat unseriousness of Max, but you can still see the maturity of the character, which is another thing that happened. Like the maturity of the characters that were presented that were not Justin was executed properly. Jennifer put a lot of good work in those few lines, showing that Harper can still be the same lovable character that we agreed with, still have the same vibe, still vibrant, colorful outfits, and still put a lot of maturity to the character where it's not cringe and weird. While this man is playing a relatively worse version of Justin. Like in the very first season, he was doing fine, but it almost seems like he kind of removed the intellectualism that was fueled by Justin's character. Like, look at this man in the final season, bro. Why are you messing with your eyebrows, bro? Why did your eyebrows change just because you took your emotions away? Because you couldn't find Alex because you were so stressed. Why? Why is this a thing? This man wants to play like some discount Temu version of Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory for whatever reason, and it doesn't work. He even was trying to do some weird callback to The Princess Bride, you know, the thing where it's like, oh, I know where you're going to put the poison kind of bit that happens in the movie, but it was so long and drawn out and so weird and boring and out of place in the entirety of the final season, where I'm like, why are you doing this? It feels like you're trying to be funny while at the same time realizing there's urgency to the situation, but the fact is I don't feel any sense of urgency. So your goal is to try to be the funny guy, but every other character in the series is also trying to be the funny guy. So why are you trying to be the funny guy too? One of the most appealing aspects of Wizards of Waverly Place and some of the OG cartoons in general was that you were able to mix comedy with the story that you were following. Wizards of Waverly Place had comedic moments, but there was still an overarching story that you followed. Yeah, there was an episodic feel to it in the first few seasons, but then eventually when they had overarching stories like following the Mason arc or the Juliet arc or the Alex versus Alex arc or the Wizard competition arc, they had some actual depth behind it. Why do you think that the Wizards of Waverly Place movie that came out ages ago still can kind of hold up to this day? That movie still has the great cinematography, acting, and storyline storylines involved that I'm surprised that, hey, how come you didn't take some elements of the seriousness that exists here and put it in the reboot? Because he has kids. So I thought maybe there's going to be a wizard competition element in here, but they only talk about it for one episode and is completely abandoned. And as you look through episode by episode by episode, you realize that there was a lot of moments that didn't need to exist, and a lot of the focal points ends up being David Henrie, aka Justin. And I can understand from the viewpoint from a lot of people who are watching from the outside view and seeing everything that's coming out from other actors and actresses and even the original creator, realizing that bro kind of just started doing his own thing and probably thought he can get away with it because they're like, oh, some people like Justin. But in the grand scheme, one of people's favorite characters was Alex, and probably the next one was Harper, and then the next one probably was even Max. Justin was probably not top 5, which, hey, don't get me wrong, it sounds a little bit harsh, but that's somewhat the reality. So at this point, is it safe to assume that he probably ruined the Wizards Beyond Waverly Place? I guess. I mean, I don't know who else had their hands in the story writing of the entirety of the show. He was an executive producer, so he had his hand in everything, so maybe he probably was part of the problem. But at some point, it feels like they were focusing too much on some of the goofs that they could do in the story without trying to build a cohesive story or a plot that can be enjoyable for all ages. It can still have somewhat of a teenage feel to it and still be a good story. It doesn't have to be something goofy just because it's attached to being Disney or Disney Kids or whatever. We are talking about the same company that was willing to do a movie following the Sprouse twins, where they were following lore about them being twins, and there was like magical science and all these different things that existed with a massive cult of other twins. Like, there is creative things you can do. Now, is it the greatest movie on planet Earth? No, don't get me wrong, but it's creative nonetheless. But yeah, if he had a lot of say in this and did a lot of those decisions, especially all the conversation I've been seeing from a lot of the OG actors, this man might have really ruined Beyond Waverly Place. And honestly, it's a damn shame, because that show could have honestly been a potential Raven's home. That's a great example of a legacy show continuing from its OG show, That's So Raven, and still maintaining relevancy for a long period of time with a bunch of new characters, because it still maintained the very basis of the OG story being told while keeping the OG cast, keeping the OG feel, keeping the OG thing, while adding some new elements to the story. That's why it had a long-lasting run. And there might be a lesson in there for him to learn. Maybe he might come out and talk about it, maybe not. Usually a lot of people don't talk about these things, so we might not get any real major confirmation. But honestly, it's a shame that this show got canceled under these circumstances. But for those who actually watched the Beyond Waverly Place finale, let me know how you feel in the comments. How did the ending go? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you think David Henrie actually has a major play in its demise? Do you think he could have improved it, changed it? Do you think he probably was jealous because of the cancellation of the Amazing O'Malleys? You let me know in the comments below. Also, leave a like on this video. It helps my channel to grow in the grand scheme. Subscribe for more videos just like this, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to get notified every single time I upload. Also, don't forget my gaming channel. I'm doing a lot of fighting games and indie games and doing a lot of shorts introducing you guys to a brand new games. Other than that, it's your boy Kadukun. I'll see you guys next time, and peace.
FMA, handle business, don't play. On point when it comes to the anime. Jack and Daxter, ayy, let's go. The ultimate heroes, don't stop, we on the road. Kadukun.